My name is Lily. Listen carefully to my story. It may change the way you see the world. It is not just a story. It is a feeling, a lesson, and maybe even a little piece of your own heart. So, stay with me until the end. It was a bright morning when the sun painted the sky with soft orange and pink colors. The birds were singing gently, and the leaves danced with the morning wind. I was sitting on the small wooden swing in my backyard, letting my feet drag through the grass. The cold dew touched my toes, making me giggle softly. My hair, messy from sleep, was blowing in my face. The world felt calm, but inside me, there was a storm. I kept looking down at the faint bruise on my wrist. It was still tender. The night before, my older brother Jack had hit me, not hard enough to leave a dark mark, but hard enough to leave something else. A little crack inside my heart. I knew Jack loved me. I knew he didn't want to hurt me, but his anger had been too strong. It was like his hands forgot how much he cared for me. My eyes were still sleepy when I heard footsteps behind me. It was Jack. He was holding a small plate with a slice of toast and honey. His brown eyes, usually full of energy, looked tired. He walked slowly toward me, placing the plate on my lap without saying a word. His hands trembled a little. "I'm sorry, Lily," he whispered, his voice small, like a broken child. I didn't answer right away. I just stared at the honey dripping from the toast. The sweetness looked so warm and golden, but I couldn't feel it. My chest was heavy. Jack sat down beside me, not too close, but near enough for me to feel the warmth of his body. "I didn't mean to," he said softly. I finally turned to look at him. His eyes were wet. Jack was not the kind of person who cried easily, but I could see he was carrying so much inside him. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to ask him why. Why did he hurt me when he was supposed to protect me? But when I looked at him, I didn't see my brother who had hit me. I saw my brother who had always walked me to school. The one who scared away the dog that chased me last summer. The one who stayed awake when I was sick, holding my hand. "Why, Jack?" I finally asked, my voice shaking slightly. He looked down at his hands. They were rough from working in the yard with Dad the day before. He rubbed them together, as if trying to wipe something off, but there was nothing there. "I was angry," he admitted. "Not at you. I didn't know where to put it, and I put it on you." There was silence, a long one, the kind where you can hear your own heartbeat. I didn't know what to say. My chest felt tight. I didn't know if I wanted to cry or scream or just sit there. Jack suddenly stood up. He took a few steps away from me and put his hands on his hips. Could see him breathing fast. His chest was moving up and down quickly, like he was trying not to fall apart. "I hate myself for it, Lily," he said. His voice cracked. "I hate that I hurt you." For the first time, I saw my strong, playful brother look small and afraid. I could see that he was carrying something heavier than he could hold. I slowly stood up and walked toward him. I didn't know if I was ready to forgive him. I didn't even know if he wanted me to. But when I reached him, I put my small hand on his arm. His skin was warm. I felt him freeze for a second, like he didn't expect me to come closer. I wrapped my arms around him, holding him tight. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. His arms slowly wrapped around me too, and then I felt it. His shoulders shaking. He was crying, quietly but deeply. His face was pressed against my hair, and I could feel his tears on my scalp. "I'm so sorry," he kept saying softly. "I'm so sorry." I didn't tell him it was okay, because it wasn't, but I stayed with him. I held him until he was done crying, and then we sat on the grass. We didn't speak. We just sat there, letting the morning sun warm us. Later that day, when we went back inside, my mom noticed the bruise on my wrist. She walked over and knelt in front of me, her eyes full of worry. She brushed my hair back and asked, "What happened, honey?" Jack, who was standing behind me, suddenly said, "I did it." My mom's eyes widened. She turned to look at him. I saw how she froze, confused and hurt. Jack's voice was low but steady. "I hit her," he admitted. "I was angry and I hurt her. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry." My mom didn't say anything at first. She just stood there, looking at both of us. Her eyes filled with tears. Then, slowly, she walked over to Jack and hugged him. Her arms were firm and gentle, holding him like she was afraid he might disappear. "You are not your anger, Jack," she whispered. "You made a mistake, but you are not a mistake. You are still my boy." Jack started to cry again, but this time, his shoulders didn't shake with guilt. This time, he cried with relief. I stood beside them, watching, and in that moment, I realized something. People hurt, and sometimes they hurt the ones they love, not because they want to, but because they are carrying something they don't know how to hold. But love is not about never making mistakes. It's about being brave enough to face them. It's about being strong enough to say sorry and being kind enough to forgive, even when it's hard. That night, Jack and I sat in my room. We didn't talk about what had happened. We played cards and laughed about silly things. But when he left my room, just before he turned off the light, he said, "I'll be better, Lily. I promise." And I knew he meant it. So, if you are listening to my story right now, remember this. Sometimes the people we love will hurt us. And sometimes we will hurt them too. But love is also about being there afterward. It's about holding on, even when it's hard. It's about seeing the goodness in someone, even when they have made a mistake, because love is stronger than anger. Love is the hand that reaches out when you expect it to pull away. If this story touched your heart, if it made you think or feel something, please take a moment to subscribe and like. Your support means so much. It gives me the strength to share more stories like this, stories of hope, love, and life. Thank you for listening with your heart. The seasons slowly changed, but Grandma's presence never left me. Spring brought soft lilac blossoms. The same flowers she used to gather in small vases by the windowsill. I would gently brush my fingertips over the petals, feeling as if I were touching a part of her. The summer sun warmed the wooden swing in the backyard, and on quiet evenings, I would sit there barefoot, feeling the cool grass between my toes. Sometimes I would close my eyes and imagine her sitting beside me, her hand resting gently over mine. Autumn arrived with its golden leaves and crisp winds. I walked along the park path, kicking the leaves into small piles, hearing them crunch beneath my feet. It was the kind of walk Grandma used to love, the kind where she would pause every few steps just to admire a particularly red leaf or a small squirrel darting across the path. And then came winter, the first winter without her. It was on a cold December evening, with snowflakes drifting softly from the sky, that I found myself in the basement again. I sat cross-legged on the floor, slowly running my fingers over the letters in the wooden trunk. The music box was in my lap, and I gently wound it, letting the delicate melody fill the room. I stared at the old letters, wondering how many times Grandma had held them, how many times she had pressed them against her chest, longing for Grandpa. I picked up one of the envelopes, carefully opened it, and pulled out the yellowed paper inside. Margaret, my love. The letter began in Grandpa's neat handwriting. I dream of you every night. I dream of your smile, your laughter, and the way you hold my hand when you're afraid. Even when we are apart, you are with me. You are my home. No matter where I am, I closed my eyes, clutching the letter tightly. I could feel their love in the words. It was still alive, still so real. And in that moment, I realized that the love they shared had never truly ended. It was still here, wrapped around me like a warm blanket, tucked away in the pages of the letters, humming softly in the tune of the music box. The next morning, I made a decision. I woke up early, bundled myself in my thick scarf and gloves, and walked to the park. The snow crunched beneath my boots, and my breath formed tiny clouds in the icy air. When I reached the pond, it was nearly frozen over, except for a small patch of water where a few ducks were gathered. I sat on the same wooden bench where I had spoken to the elderly man months before. I carefully removed the locket from around my neck and held it in my hand. My fingers were cold, but the locket was warm against my palm, warm with the memories it held. I slowly opened it, gazing at the tiny photo of my grandparents. They were so young, so full of love and life. I stared at their smiling faces for a long time, feeling the ache in my chest soften into something gentler, something warmer. And then, with trembling hands, I did something I never expected. I stood up, walked carefully over to the edge of the pond, and knelt in the snow. I whispered softly, "I love you, Grandma. I always will." Then with a deep breath, I gently placed the locket on the snow-covered ground, right near the edge of the water. For a moment I hesitated, my heart pounding in my chest. But then, as the cold wind brushed against my face, I knew it was time. I watched as a gust of wind swept across the surface of the pond, carrying the tiniest snowflakes with it, and then, softly and quietly, the locket slipped into the water. At first, my heart clenched and tears stung my eyes. But then, as I stared at the ripples spreading across the water, something remarkable happened. The sun broke through the heavy winter clouds, and its light touched the icy surface of the pond. For a brief, breathtaking moment, the water glistened like 1,000 diamonds, and the locket sparkled beneath the surface. It was as if the whole world had turned to gold, and in that golden light, I imagined them, my grandparents, dancing together once more. I pictured them on a soft meadow, twirling beneath the stars, with the same love they had shared so many years ago. I closed my eyes and smiled. The locket was not gone. It was simply free to float with the water, free to drift with the wind, free to carry their love far beyond me. As I walked home through the snow, I felt lighter. The weight that had pressed on my chest for so long had softened into something gentler, a warmth that I knew would never leave me. In the days that followed, I still visited the park. I would sit by the pond and watch the water, knowing that somewhere beneath the rippling surface, the locket still shimmered faintly, holding the love of two people who once shared their hearts with the world. And every evening, when the sun slipped below the horizon, I would look up at the sky. Sometimes I swore I could see 2 stars twinkling brighter than the rest. "Good night, Grandma," I would whisper softly. "Good night, Grandpa." And in the hush of the evening breeze, I could almost hear them whispering back, "Good night, Lily. We love you. If you've stayed with me this far, thank you. Truly, from the bottom of my heart. This story is a piece of my soul. And if it has touched yours even a little, please subscribe and leave a like. It helps me continue sharing stories that come from the heart, stories of love, of loss, and of the beautiful ways we keep those we love alive. And remember, love doesn't end. It becomes part of us. It lives in the stories we tell, in the memories we cherish, and in the quiet moments when the sun brushes against the water. Love is forever. As the seasons changed, so did I. Grief, which once felt so heavy, slowly turned into something softer, something almost gentle. It became a quiet companion, walking beside me, but no longer weighing me down. On the first day of spring, I visited Grandma's backyard. The sun was warm on my face, and the scent of jasmine lingered in the air. The old wooden swing was still there, slightly weathered, but sturdy, just as she had left it. I sat down, letting my legs dangle as I gently pushed myself back and forth. The creak of the wood against the rusty chains filled the air. For the first time in months, I didn't feel sadness sitting with me. I felt peace. I reached for the locket around my neck and opened it slowly. The tiny photograph of Grandma and Grandpa smiled up at me. Their faces, filled with so much joy, seemed to sparkle in the sunlight. "Hi, Grandma," I whispered softly. A warm breeze brushed against my face, ruffling my hair ever so gently. I smiled faintly. Just then, I noticed something near the edge of the yard, tiny buds of jasmine starting to bloom. I slowly walked over and knelt down beside them, running my fingers over the soft petals. I could hear Grandma's voice in my mind. You know, Lily, jasmine is special. It blooms at night, filling the air with its sweetness. Even in the dark, it still offers beauty. I closed my eyes and breathed in deeply, letting the delicate fragrance fill my chest. She was right. Even in darkness, beauty could bloom. Even in sadness, love could linger. Later that day, I went back inside and opened the trunk in the basement once more. This time, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't searching for something I had lost. I was simply revisiting memories that were still very much alive. I carefully unfolded one of Grandpa's letters and read it aloud, my voice steady and calm. My dearest Margaret, I saw the most beautiful sunset today. It reminded me of your eyes, the way they glow with warmth, even on the cloudiest days. I miss you, but I carry you with me. You are in the colors of the sky, the gentle waves of the sea, and the softness of the morning breeze. Forever yours, James. I pressed the letter to my chest and closed my eyes, and suddenly I felt surrounded by their love. Not only the love they shared with each other, but the love they had given me. It was still there. It had never left. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself drawn back to the park, the one where I had spoken with the elderly man by the pond. Each time I visited, I hoped I might see him again. I wanted to tell him how much his words had meant to me, but he was never there. One day I asked a woman who was walking her dog if she had ever seen him, the man with the gentle smile. She asked softly, "Oh, he used to come here every morning. He would sit on that bench and feed the birds." Her face grew somber and she let out a small sigh. "But he passed away last winter," she added quietly. He had been coming here every day since his wife died. This park was his way of remembering her. I felt a sudden lump in my throat, and my eyes stung with tears. My chest tightened with sadness, but then I felt something else, something warm and comforting. It was the realization that he too had carried love with him every day. Even in his solitude, he had found a way to honor the memory of someone he cherished. That afternoon, I sat on the same bench where we had once spoken. I closed my eyes and imagined him sitting beside me, his gentle hands tossing crumbs to the birds, his eyes soft with kindness. I whispered softly, "Thank you for teaching me that love never truly leaves." The gentle sound of wings flapping caught my attention. I opened my eyes to see a small bird land on the edge of the bench. It tilted its head and chirped softly, almost as if it recognized me. I smiled faintly and scattered a few crumbs I had brought along. The bird hopped closer, pecking at the crumbs, unafraid. I sat there for a long time, letting the sun warm my skin and the gentle wind brush against my face. I closed my eyes and listened to the world. the rustling leaves, the distant laughter of children, and the soft splash of ducks in the pond. And in that moment, I knew that I was not alone. Love was in the wind. It was in the sunlight. It was in the bird that landed beside me. It was in every breath I took. That evening, I returned home and found myself standing by Grandma's favorite armchair. Her knitting basket still sat beside it, the needles and yarn untouched. For a moment, I thought of leaving it there, just as it was. But then, something inside me shifted. I sat down in the armchair and carefully picked up the knitting needles. I ran my fingers over the soft yarn, remembering how Grandma used to teach me the basic stitches when I was little. At first, my fingers fumbled and the stitches were uneven, but slowly, with patience, they became steadier. With every loop and knot, I felt closer to her, as if she were guiding my hands, just as she once had. When I finally finished, I held the small imperfect scarf in my hands. It wasn't perfect, but it was made with love. I placed it on the swing outside, letting the evening breeze carry the scent of jasmine over it. It felt like a small offering, a gift from my heart to hers. The days continued to pass. Seasons came and went. The flowers bloomed and withered and bloomed again. Life continued to unfold, one breath at a time. And through it all, I carried Grandma with me. In the mornings, when the sun painted the sky with colors she loved, I would look up and smile. In the evenings, when the breeze smelled faintly of jasmine, I would close my eyes and feel her presence. One day, I found myself standing by the sea, a place she had always dreamed of visiting, but never had the chance. The waves rolled in and out, gentle and endless. I stood there for a long time, listening to the rhythm of the water. Then, slowly, I reached into my pocket and pulled out the locket. I pressed it against my lips, one last time before gently opening the clasp. I knelt by the shoreline, holding the photograph of Grandma and Grandpa in my hand. I let the water lap against my fingers, and then, with a trembling breath, I placed the photo into the sea. It floated for a moment, carried by the gentle waves, and then, slowly, it drifted away, carried toward the horizon where the sun was beginning to set. Tears filled my eyes, but they were not sad tears. They were soft and full of love. I whispered softly, "I love you, Grandma. I love you, Grandpa." And as the sun dipped lower, painting the sky with golden light, I felt their presence all around me, in the sea, in the wind, and in the endless beauty of the world they had once loved. If you've listened this far, thank you, truly, for walking this journey with me. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe and leave a like. It would mean so much to me. It helps me continue to share more beautiful and meaningful stories with you. And always remember, love never leaves. It simply becomes part of the world around us, in the stars, in the wind, in the flowers, and in the memories we hold close.